All right, lesson 2.2, slope. So slope is the ratio of vertical change, so the rise, to the horizontal change. So the numerator would be the rise, and the denominator would be the run. And then we also can see I have m equals, and m stands for the slope. You'll notice that we have y sub 2 minus y sub 1, so that's a way of grouping, and x sub 2 minus x sub 1, so it's like saying group 1 and group 2. We can also classify slopes as being positive, negative, having zero slope or undefined slope, and I'll show you some of those examples. So you'll notice positive slope rises from left to right. We have negative slope, which falls from left to right, our horizontal slope, and our vertical slope. And our vertical slope is undefined, horizontal is zero slope. All right, we're going to start with a basic problem. So imagine we have a truck and the ramp that it has is 4 feet high and it is 18 feet long, and you are asked to determine the slope. So just remember, we said it's rise over run. So we know that it's 4 feet high and 18 feet long. And then of course we can reduce by dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2. So our slope is actually going to be 2 over 9. You may be given 2 ordered pairs and asked to determine the slope. So it's helpful to label them as group 1 and group 2. So you might say x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. However, it's perfectly fine if you want to call the first group x sub 2, y sub 2, and then x sub 1, y sub 1. So no matter who does the problem and how they order it, you should get the same answer. But the 8 and the 3 stay together, and the 7 and the 4 stay together. So now we're going to put that into our slope formula. All right, so recall we're going to use y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And over to the right of your screen, I have it set up slope equals the fraction bar, and I put in our subtraction signs because that's going to be helpful when our ordered pairs actually have negatives, and it helps us to remember to include them. So we're going to do y sub 2 minus the value y sub 1, which was 3, and then we go back to our and I'm using the red ones, x sub 2, which is 7, minus the 8. So our slope is going to equal 1 over negative 1. So this means that it falls from left to right. And so we have negative slope. And we can see that it's negative slope because we have a negative right there. Now we have an example with negatives. So the first thing I'm going to do is label x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2, and that's going to help me keep everything in order. You can see over to the right of the screen, I have my fraction bar and my minus signs. So then we're going to say negative 7, that's my y sub 2, minus negative 7, and then we go back to our x sub 2 to start with, so we have 3 minus 8. And then if we say add the opposite, now we have slope equals 0 over 3 plus a negative 8 is negative 5. And we know that when 0 is in the numerator, that it's equal to 0. So this is 0 slope. So that means we should get a horizontal line. And let's prove that by graphing. Okay, so now we're going to plot our ordered pairs. So 8, negative 7, we're going to go over 8 and down 7. And if if I put the tick marks correctly, we should have exactly 8 and 7 down. And then over 3 down 7. And then I'm going to put my line with my end arrows, and there is my horizontal line for the slope of 0, -5. Okay, so finally you can determine if two lines are parallel or perpendicular by using slope. So if lines have the same slope, they're going to be parallel, and if slopes are negative reciprocals of each other, then they will be perpendicular. So we'll look at some graphs of those lines and what the number values would look like. Okay, so same slope means that they are parallel. So you might end up with a slope of 4/8 and a slope of 1/2, and virtually they're the same slope. You might get something like the slope is 7 and the slope is 7/1. Again, the same. So they would be parallel. So just what they might look like on a graph, not necessarily the slopes that I just wrote down, but on a graph, parallel lines will never cross. Lines that have negative reciprocals will be perpendicular. So that might be something like if a slope was 2/9 and we end up with a slope of -9/2. So it's the reciprocal that flips, and we have opposite signs. And so perpendicular means that they would cross and look something like this and form right angles.